in Lagos. It's a great day to be at the Wheat Baker. It's a great day to be sitting in the room that UPDC PLC invited all of us to sit in. Are you happy to be here this morning? I am happy. I am excited. What are you looking forward to today? What are you looking forward to? Random question. You might answer to me, or you might refresh your memory. I understand that the ushers are helping us bring all those who are out there having something warm to eat or drink. And in a moment, we'll start together. I look forward to learning. I look forward to information that would help me make some decisions, at least now or in 2025. Or 2025 has started for a number of people already, so we're here to get ideas and information that will help us make better decisions. Would ask everyone to please rise for the opening prayer and Nigeria national anthem before we get into the crux of the matter. Please rise with us. To lead the prayer, it's our head of asset management at UPDC PLC, Adedipe. Let's welcome him. He's here.
Thank you, everyone. I will just close as much as possible to move forward and as we pray, so that we will know exactly that the first people that came in are occupying the front rows. Thank you. So let's pray. Our Father in heaven, we thank you because today has been set and you have kept us alive to witness it. We thank you for the Real Estate Summit. Indeed, it is now from glory to glory, and we appreciate you in the mighty name of Jesus. For those that we have invited that are here, we thank you for joining mercies. And for those that are still on their way, we pray, oh Lord, that you will bring them here safely in Jesus' name. Above all, oh Lord, all informations, all insights, and all knowledge that we will receive today will equip us for the opportunities that lies ahead. It will help us individually and for all the corporate bodies that are represented here. So I pray, oh Lord, there will be new direction and new discretion. We pray for UPDC. It will continue to grow from strength to strength. And our leadership role in this industry will not be tainted in the mighty name of Jesus. And above all, our country will be better for it. In Jesus' mighty name we have prayed.
And everybody say amen. We remain standing for the Nigerian national anthem. If you want to move forward, it's a good time to move immediately after the anthem before we take our seats. We'll play the first stanza only. Thank you.
Nigeria, we hail thee, our own dear native land. Though tribe and tongue may differ, in brotherhood we stand. Nigerians old and proud to serve our sovereign motherland.
Someone before already, they may be on the seat behind you, and if they're too far away, ask them to move closer to you. Ask them to move up, move up, move up, move up. At UPDC, we do believe that first comers should have an advantage. Those who come in late shouldn't now come and sit in front of you, and then they might have hair that's bigger than yours, and you'll be wondering why they're now blocked seats in front of you, except maybe the very front row. Please feel free to move all the way, move all the way. And that's what happens in life. Many times we take comfortable positions that we think are safe, somewhere behind, and later wonder, why is that person there now? Well, they took the seats, they took the opportunity, and here we were, playing it safe. So please move, let's move, let's move, let's move. It's better for us all. Yes, some people are moving, we'll take a moment. Yes, thank you, thank you. Let's do this together. Thank you very much. I will very quickly like to recognize, appreciate, and welcome some of the very distinguished people here with us this morning. Of course, our chief inviter and chief host, the managing director and CEO of UPDC PLC. Everyone, say hello to Mr. Odunayo Ojo. Good morning, sir. Our executive Director, Development and Projects, Ms. Bidemi Fadayomi, is also here. Good morning. Thank you for having us all. A Non-Executive Director, Mr. Deni Falade, we say good morning to you. Welcome, sir. Our speakers who have been here before most of us, Mr. Bismarck Rewane, good morning. Glad to have you. Dr. Biodun Adedipe is also here. Good morning, sir. Mr. Ayo Ibaru, I believe, is on his way, and we'll see him when it is time. All our invited guests who are already here, we say thank you and good morning. And we have a number of invited guests who have joined us virtually on YouTube, and we say good morning to you. Please wave in case they can see us. We're waving to them. Thank you for joining us virtually. We miss you here, but we understand that you have to be where you are right now. My name is Joyce Daniels, and it's an honor to be the Master of Ceremonies here today. 3 years running an annual summit. There must be a reason, and there must be some expectations. To tell us a little bit more about the reason and the expectations, I'd like to welcome the the Executive Director, Development and Projects, Ms. Bidemi Fadayomi, to welcome us and answer the questions of why we're here and what are we to expect.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. All protocols observed. I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to join us this morning. We know you're all very busy, and we appreciate the fact that you feel that it's important to come and share this day with us. About 3 years ago, when we decided to establish the Real Estate Summit, we felt that it was important as industry leaders to create a platform where fellow professionals, experts could come together to dialogue, collaborate, and provide insight, not just to other industry players, but also to the wider population. So it's very happy and blessed to see so many faces in the audience who will be part of that engagement. As you know, our nation has in this time undergone a significant change. These shifts, as stated by our current economic reforms and their impact on the real estate sector, is a shift that will have an impact not just on the future of the nation, but also on the sector itself. Nigeria as a country has undergone significant economic reforms. And these reforms will have an impact on not just how we operate as a firm, but also how we operate as an industry. It poses unique challenges and opportunities. And the question that we want to ask today is, how do we navigate this moment? How do we take advantage of these challenges and opportunities to further enhance an industry that is known not just for its ability to create wealth and jobs for the future, but also its impact on growing the economy as a whole? We hope that the experts who have graciously agreed to participate in today's discussion will provide us with the insight in order to overcome the hurdles that we're likely to face in the year to come, as well as the strategies that we will adopt in order to improve our companies and grow the economy as a whole. Thank you all very much for participating again, and I look forward to an engaging and dialogue with all the panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Bidemi. We are glad to be here. We're glad to learn along. We're glad to glean from the insights, because every decision made will be better, not only for UPDC, but for each and every one of us. So please appreciate our ED Development and Projects, Ms. Fadayomi. Thank you. We're jumping right into the core of the matter. No fluff at all. Our first speaker, who has been here since quite early, over 44 years, he has been in not only the consulting space, but in academia, in banking, and in speaking. He hasn't only consulted for locals, he's had experiences around the world. His career spans from University of Lagos to the World Bank, and of course, various financial institutions. This is the conversation about the economy. What are the challenges? what are the opportunities? What should we be looking out for? And what should we be ready to get done? Please welcome Dr. Biodun Adedipe as he speaks to us for about 20 minutes. And in the course of the day, there will be time to have questions, and he's very well able to answer them. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. Yes. A very good morning to you all, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. And I put out my appreciation and profuse thanks to the leadership of UPDC for having me here before you this morning and to speak to the theme of this summit, and that is current economic reforms and their impact on the real estate sector. And a sector that is very dear to my mind, and I will tell you quickly why it is so. Two major reasons. One is that in most economies around the world, the real estate sector is a significant contributor to the GDP. That is one. The second reason is from the perspective of an economic analyst. When we had the Great Depression of 1929-1930, and looking at data from that time up until date, and then running back to over 800 years of financial crisis globally, it was established in a study done by Bernanke and Co. of the World Bank that anytime there was a dampening in the financial sector, its impact on the GDP of any geography you want to consider or global economy was always half of the impact of a crisis in the real estate sector, proven with data of over 100 years that was interrogated. And that means, in my own simple interpretation, without going into details and technicalities, it means to me that when you look at the relationship between real estate and the economy, and then the financial sector and the economy, the impact of one is that of the other. So that also underscores why, for me, I always look out for what is in any reform or policy of any government concerning the real estate and what they have set as their goals and aspirations for their national economy. When you look globally at the dynamics of population, nowadays, and looking forward to year 2050, how is the world population likely to grow? We're expecting the world population to grow to about 9 billion people between now and 1950. But more of those people will live in urban areas. In fact, if you check the migration data globally, you find that in the last 10 years there's been an intense urbanization happening globally, including Nigeria here. In Nigeria, about 7-8 years ago, about 46% of our population was in the urban areas. But today, we're talking about 54%. So that is even within our own geography here. Now, beyond that, there's also the issue of housing. Now, in terms of housing needs, we also see an increase in that across different countries around the world. So that poses a challenge, number one, of the population increasing, number two, increasing urbanization, and therefore intensifying the need for decent and, I would say, environment-friendly accommodation. Now, that said, we also look around the world. Now, by the time we got into January 2023, we're looking at 5 major global disruptions that any business person, wherever you are in the world, will have to contend with. We talked then about the Ukraine war. We talked about the pandemic. We talked about macroeconomic instability. We talked about geopolitics. And then we talked about social divisiveness. Now, we looked at those 5, and we said, if you are doing business, you should map this and come to also understand that whenever something is happening anywhere in the world, you can't assume that you are, immune. So now, and I'll give 2 quick examples. First was when the Russia invaded Ukraine. Let me use that word because that was the first description. Of course, that war has had many appellations. From Russia invasion of Ukraine, it was branded as Russia-Ukrainian war, and then later became Ukraine war. So, but the whole idea simply is this. Until that war broke out, and then, of course, taken along with the pandemic, life was still fairly normal. In fact, after the pandemic, we thought we had gotten it all done. Because by then, we had returned to contact-intensive economic and business activities. And so we thought, yes, the world is now getting back to normal. Then that invasion happened. And then suddenly, I woke up here in Nigeria, and I discovered that the bread of my breakfast table was more expensive. And I wondered why. And I was told that, it's because of the war taking place in Europe. And I was like, why should the war in Europe cause price of bread, a derivative of wheat, to go up in Nigeria? And I was told that, look, Ukraine is systemic in the supply of grains to the world market, accounting for 24.1%. I said, wow. So that means I should become more sensitive to whatever is happening around the world and then do a tracing that works this way, which of course I've been doing over the years, but it became now more important. How is this affecting the global economy? Are there disruptions it will cause? If those disruptions happen, how will that affect the geography where I operate? I operate in Nigeria, but I also do business in several other geographies. So how will this affect them all? So how will that then affect my own sector? How will that affect my own business? And now coming back to what Joyce said earlier on, how should I respond in terms of strategic initiatives? And so we began to look at the world recovering from COVID-19, central banks doing what we call normalization, and that is raising rates, and how that, for example, affected Japan in a very interesting way that Nigeria should learn from. And that is, within the space of 2 years, about $60 billion of Japan's external reserves evaporated in response to the normalization. Because dollar assets now became more attractive, as investors trooped out of Japan to US investing in assets there. So the lesson is, I will come to that later, in connecting to what is happening in Nigeria now, and especially the recent loan we took from IMF. All right? So I will say a few things about that. Now, everything seemed to be in proper shape. But by the time we got to end of 2023, enter 2024, the dynamics had changed completely. And I'll pick two examples. August 2023, the Indian government announced the restriction on the export of non-basmati rice. Why was that so? Intense monsoon rains of the kind they never saw in India in some 30 years. But that led into destruction of many rice plantations. So in order to ensure food security for the most populated country in the world, and by the way, June 2023 was when India overtook China and became the most populated country in the world. So in response to that, the Indian government said, we are placing restriction on the export of non-basmati rice. So the price of rice went up everywhere in the world, not just in Nigeria. And again, we checked that out. What could be the driver? Then we discovered that India accounts for 40.1% of the rice we eat in the world. Then I told myself, so this benchmark of Thailand rice in the global rice market and the mindset we have in Nigeria that we eat mostly Thailand rice is not really the fact that the data is showing. So we took that on one side. And now came the issue of BRICS Plus in October. About 55 countries applied to join the BRICS. Of course, 6 of them pre-qualified to join formally January 2024. 5 eventually joined. 1 dropped, and that was Argentina. Argentina having a similar problem to Nigeria. Currency crisis and economy in serious trouble. Now, all of that said, we now also roll it back. Say, look, we talked about divisiveness, but we saw it play out in the banking industry in March 2023 when Silicon Valley Bank collapsed. Within the space of 48 hours of information shared about its capital raise of about $5 billion. Now, within 48 hours, the news got round, and everybody showing interest in investing in the shares of SVB pulled out. And so the bank collapsed. And we said, okay, that means in the risk, not but everybody doing business in the world, you should have in your risk register social media risk. All right? Now came this issue of moving forward, looking at now geopolitics taking a new dimension. And I speak to this week. All right? We've seen geopolitics, influencing a lot of things around the world, causing disruptions, of course, a reevaluation of strategies and business models. But it recently took a new turn when Trump won the general elections in the US. Now, 2 things are playing out there. Number 1 is those things we have put together now are referred to as Trumponomics. Okay? And then the other side to it is the current administration is also taking some steps to preempt Trump when he takes office early next year. And of course, around the world as well, different countries are taking actions in expectation of what Trump's actions and choices will bring in 2025 and also going forward. But the big deal for us is that side where I put the implications. What do we expect will happen? Of course, there's a general expectation that the US dollar will strengthen on account of Trump coming to office and, of course, doing a number of things like deregulating and to stimulate some sectors of the economy, especially, as it has been announced, self-driving vehicles and, of course, cutting corporate tax rates from 21% to 15%. Now, when you look at that also, we expect that the turning up of the heat on the Sino-American trade war will also make global trade to dampen. If global trade dampens, that will also cause some disruptions to supply chains, and of course, it's going to have inflationary tendencies, especially for the US. And why is that so? Because a promise of 50% increase in tariffs on Chinese imports on the one hand, and therefore the rest of us in the world, ranging between 10 and 20% tariff increase. That would mean, of course, that whatever you import from the US or is imported into the US, whichever way it plays out, we also trigger inflationary pressure. So generally, that is what we expect. Now, when we put all this together, let's come back to Nigeria. What are the major policy shifts since President Tinubu took office? I identified 6 of them in this particular conversation. Specifically, the first one he announced was removing the subsidy. But in reality, President Tinubu did not remove the subsidy. It was President Buhari that did. And he did that in December 2021, when he signed the Petroleum Industry Bill into an act. He now made a remark that sections 205 to 208 of that act should not be implemented until 18 months' time. I had a conversation on this on Channels TV January 22. And this was the remark I made when I comment on it. And I said, it's a good thing he has signed. It's now a law. But postponing the sections that deal with first subsidy to 18 months' time is simply interpreted as Baba kick the can of first subsidy removal 18 months down the road. And 18 months to December 21 will be June 23. And if this man will move office May 23, that means whoever will take office after him, that can will land on his head. And so when Tinubu announced it, I simply told myself, it's still not the obvious thing, which I interpreted as, I've entered office now as president. I didn't meet first subsidy, allowed, number one. Number two, another law, the Appropriation Act, signed also by Buhari for 2023, which again was a second law, had no provision for subsidy second half of the year. So the man had to give us that by our confidence that is bold president who can take tough decisions. A month after, there was the unified exchange rate policy, willing seller, willing buyer, which for me till tomorrow, I take a stand that I think is not the best thing for this economy. And I say that advisedly, based on data we have interrogated over many years. And now, let me also drop this here. There is data for anything you want in Nigeria, except you don't know where the data is or you don't know where to go. And I tell you, basically, I was privileged to write the business plan for the National ID Card project that produced the NIN we all carry around now. That was some 16 years ago. And what we discovered that there was data everywhere in Nigeria about everybody, but they were disconnected. So we call them disparate data. So what we needed to do then was build a platform, technology platform, that we connect all these existing databases, so that if you came to me, for example, and I happen to be a banker, and you ask for a loan, I don't carry documents. All I will need is your name, that's your national identification number, and then once you are uniquely identified, I will have access to anywhere Nigeria data exists on you. That will help me then to make a credit decision and choose whether to lend to you or not. That was the concept behind it. Then I had the privilege of writing that business plan in 2008. Now, where I'm going is this, that when you look at the data, the Naira has suffered episodic devaluation since the 1970s. And it has happened over time. And why is that so? Because, number one, our economy is structurally defective. Number two, it is management challenge. Of course, it is post-colonial. It is import-dependent. It is monoproduct. And of course, it's a political economy, which means most decisions are politically motivated. Now, we also have the issue of fiscal consolidation and, of course, tax reforms, which I will speak to shortly. But with respect to, there are three major planks of reforms that the government itself is projecting. That is in the next slide. Three major reforms. They said oil production, the agri sector, and trade. Let's take trade first. And the plan is that if we can boost trade, then we'll be able to support our current account. That's the interplay between, our balance of payments. There are two major accounts, the current account and the capital account. Current takes care of your merchandise import and export. So what is the interplay between those two? Capital account is where finance comes and brings a balance into having a viable, that's the macroeconomic goal, viable balance of payments position. Now, if you are aiming towards that, that means you are looking at both your current account and your, capital account. But the essence of the trade is to strengthen the current so that we can build surplus repeatedly and also get an accretion to our external reserves. So, and that is why that is very important to the government. Secondly, reference to oil production. Hopefully well that this economy is dependent. I prefer to call it hydrocarbons. All right? Hydrocarbons are counted on the average for about 90.1% of merchandise exports in the last 2 to 3 years. So in which case, whether we like it or not, oil is still important to this economy, in spite of all the noise about net zero and all this talk about, alternative energy. Now, the bottom line is this. If we have been producing crude oil in Nigeria, there's also a permanent first line charge on whatever we produce. And that is about 450,000 barrels of crude oil per day. So anytime we produce, that is the first line of deduction. The rest is what we account for as export. And I say that deliberately here because people look at selling crude oil to domestic refineries as a zero-sum game. And I said, no, it's not a zero-sum game. What it has actually done is that first line charge of 40,000 barrels per day we have done over the last 30 years, ladies and gentlemen. It has been there as a constant figure. No matter the volume we produce, and the data is there and available. If you go to the website of Central Bank of Nigeria, for example, you have the data there aggregated over. Check that out, right? But what this means then is that whatever is sold in Naira to domestic refineries has no effect on what you earn from the export of crude oil because it has been sold in the last 30 years plus. Okay? So now, it then is important for Nigeria to ramp up production of crude oil. A lot of that has been stolen over the years. In fact, it was very bad 10 years ago. Some of us probably are not aware of this. There was an interview the then Petroleum Minister, Dizani, granted Christiana Mampo of CNN, where she made the remark that oil theft in Nigeria at that time, that's 10 years ago, was in the range of 400 to 600,000 barrels per day. That was 10 years ago. So if we now had news in the last couple of days from NNPC that our production level, including condensate, is at 1.8 million barrels per day, and people are wondering how come? But the explanation is that yes, we know about 200,000 barrels is condensate, so the actual crude oil production will be about 1.6. So which means then what has happened is that a reduction in oil theft is what brought the figure up from 1.32 million barrels per day we recorded in September. So that is the way. The third one here is agri sector, and we have said that repeatedly. Until we resolve the problem of the agri sector, we are not going anywhere with breaking the back of inflation in Nigeria. Because food inflation is the major issue. Now, let me go quickly. Next slide. And this is what I call the dashboard. What it does shows you are the major indices that you can look at to interpret what is happening in the environment where you do business. And then how they relate to each other, and mean your own opinion on the trends with each of them. How then would this likely play out within the economy I operate in? Then what should be my own strategic response? Now the economy is growing, no doubt. There's no doubt about that. In real terms, that is taking the real growth rate of the GDP. If you look at the line, in the last 12 years, the growth of the economy has trended up. In the full slide deck, which UPDC will share with you, we see the chart where that is demonstrated using the data. It's on upward trend, but is it growing inclusively? Is it growing fast enough? No. That means the challenge is growing fast and also inclusively. Now, the FX market, the official rate as at 20th of November, vis-a-vis the parallel market rate, premium of 3.27%. Keep that below 5%. IMF will advise you to ensure you don't incentivize round tripping. That is looking well. But Naira has depreciated by 46.7% at the official window since the beginning of the year. At the parallel market by 30.33%. Now, MPR, vis-a-vis inflation, the Central Bank Management and Monetary Policy Committee claim the reason we have increased it by 850 basis points so this year is because to fight inflation. Again, there is an argument that's there. Because looking at data from 1960 till date, the impact of changes in policy rate on inflation rate is just 37%. Which means about 63% of the changes are explained by other factors. So inflation in Nigeria is structural in nature. Okay? But of course, because of time, I won't dwell much on that. So, but details of all of this are in my 46 slides deck, which everyone will have available. So, let me just make a comment on one here. Because the reality is that the exchange value of the Naira is the critical element in this very economy. Because everything we do in Nigeria is with reference to the dollar Naira exchange value. And so that is why I also gave a number of, indices here, that when you relate them to each other, it gives you an idea of where Naira will likely go in 2025. There's a table where I have that laid out with the assumptions in the full slide deck. Let me go to the last slide here because of time. I'll take 2 minutes, 13 seconds. Now, this table will give you my own look. That consult and the assumptions we have behind every of those major macroeconomic. But what is the story? The story we see is an economy that will grow faster than in 2024. We also see an economy where the inflation rate will temper somewhat in 2025. We also see an economy where the central bank will begin to reduce the MPR, but not significantly. But first, as a signal that we are now interested in growth because inflation has been tamed. Some things have been done also in the agri space that gives us the confidence that we may, in fact, begin to break the back of food inflation. So once inflation begins to come down, we see central bank now bowing to the pressure that it should focus more on growth-inducing policy, okay. Now for real estate, what does this mean? Now there are specific things in the tax reforms relating to real estate sector. But if you ask me, and this is where I will leave off my speech this morning, that this sector needs to engage more in advocacy, especially with our government, top government functionaries and the policymakers. That was what I did for the banking industry way back in 1994 when Abacha's first budget came out. I won't mention his name, but one of our leaders in the banking industry in Nigeria made a remark that Abacha threw out the baby with the bathwater. And I told my colleagues in banking that no, That is not the way I interpret it. And this is the way I will put it. That a mind that is trained to see opportunities never surrender to or solve problems. In which case, challenges are many in the operating environment. We recognize them. But what we are looking for are opportunities. So that particular year, 1994, the manufacturers made so much noise. And Abacha's budget followed what they wanted. So that was the year we also created in Nigerian banking what is called the Senior Treasurer's Retreat. And we began doing that every year up until date. Which I made clear to them in banking that we needed also to meet before the end of the year so that our own input can go to inflate the budget of the coming year. So that is what my time is up. Thank you so very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Many thanks to Dr. Adedipe. He has done such a detailed job of leading us into the conversation of where the economy is, what some of the challenges are. Did you enjoy that? Did you hear or see a thing or two that you're like, oh, yes? Sometimes you turn your head a little bit. The good thing is he's still here through the rest of the event. We'll ask questions, we'll have interactions, and we'll dig deeper into the conversation later on where he'll be asked specific questions as relates the real estate sector and even each and every one of us personally. So please appreciate our first speaker again, Dr. Biodun Adedipe. Before I welcome our next speaker, I'd like to recognize the presence of Mrs. Temitope Akimbola, who is seated comfortably. She's the Director, Monitoring and Compliance, Lagos State Real Estate Regulatory Authority. She's here today representing the Special Advisor to Mr. Governor on Housing, who is Barrister Barakat Odunuga Bakari. Welcome, ma'am. Thank you for honoring us. Our next speaker, who I personally like to call him the economic oracle. If you're having any conversation about economy, especially in Nigeria, you go to the oracle, you drop your chalk, you walk in backward, you move your shoes at the door, and then you put some leaf in your mouth, and then he'll come and say, my son, let me tell you. There is absolutely nobody who is serious about understanding what's happening in the economy in Nigeria and wouldn't somehow defer to him directly or indirectly. So we are really glad that he could make it today. Never ever aging. Maybe he will throw that into as a bonus to tell us what he does as well. Please, you know who I'm talking about. Let's welcome together Mr. Bismarck Rewane.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let me stand on our existing protocols. I think today Biodun has done a great job in terms of outlining the uncertainties ahead, together with the uncertainties today, and the economic picture that we face. Also, I think this morning, The Economist published just a few minutes ago the World Ahead 2025 edition, which had been prepared before, but now, based on what has happened, has changed. So today, my presentation is going to be, and if you put up the slides, next slide, please. Next slide. We know why we're here, we know who the audience is, but my understanding of the real estate industry is that over the past few years, real estate was known just for construction and home ownership. Now we have in between the developers, and the developers are, the success of developers really depends on how the price of money, because basically they're borrowing money to develop, to make a yield, either to sell part of it, to let out part of it, to hold to maturity, and so on. So the real estate industry is broken into various areas. And my understanding, again, is this, that there's property development, there's commercial real estate, there's high-end real estate, right? There's office development, there are warehouses, and I told a friend of mine yesterday that 10 years ago, we're looking in my office to set up an archive. So we went and moved to Ekpe and rented a flat in Ekpe as an archive. The rent 10 years ago was 200,000 naira a year. That was before Ambode got into office. Now, that was before the refinery that was before the deep sea port. That was before the Ekpe Ijebu-Ode road was concessioned. Now, 10 years after, the agent came to me and said, sorry, sir, your rent is going up from 200,000 naira a year to 2 million naira a year. And I said, why? He said, come to Ekpe and see for yourself. So I thought about it and I said, oh Christ, what has happened? One, refinery is now in production. The seaport is there. The Ekpe to Shagamu Ijebu-Ode road has been awarded. The tank farms are there. Tolerams and others have all moved in. So it's about location, 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 economic activity, and economic determines the price. That is a valid anecdotal evidence of how reform, policy change, economic activity can drive the process. Same flat, same house, no new, nothing. So when you look at that times 10, the exchange rate at that time was 200 and something parallel market. So if you did it times 10, exchange rate alone, it would have been 2,300 or something. But today we are 1,700. So he has made more money from that investment, which he didn't make, he had made that investment for, than the exchange rate depreciation. Cumulative inflation, he's outperformed everything. So to say that the real estate sector does not respond to conventional logic and normal economic stimuli is wrong. Therefore, the purpose of this meeting today is to look at what are the reforms and which of them are relevant to real estate and how will that drive the value and the opportunity in this sector. So, real estate in Nigeria, of course we have residential, commercial, warehouses, mixed use, a lot of mixed use now, then adaptive reuse, and we have, I think Bjorn did a lot of work on this. Some of the things, we have the landlords who are about 30% of residential properties. Households in Nigeria, 44 million households, and each household having about 5 people. Multidimensional poverty, a lot of tenants, population growth, urbanization, and demographic change. And also virtual working habits, which means, because normally real estate is location, location, location. But if I can now live in Pakpalanto or Ewekoro, catch the train every morning so what does that do to real estate? So it's not just exchange rate depreciation or subsidy reduction. It is the investment in infrastructure. That is part of the reform agenda of governments. Completing projects that were left half complete. And that makes it possible for me to live in Festac, come here, or and affects everything that we are seeing. So, home ownership rate, again, Nigerians have been perpetual tenants all their lives, so that changes, and that's where developers come in and begin to invest. And how would they raise their money? I think Bjorn talked about advocacy. The intervention mechanism to make them raise money in different, and I'll tell you what, as we're sitting down there, I noticed, and I shared that with my guy here, Mr. Faladay, that look, the one-year treasury bill that was just issued is at 30.8%, which means that if I invest 100 million naira in a treasury bill for 1 year, I'll get 130 million naira at the end of the year. The other option is to build a house for 100 million naira and see whether I can get a rent of 30 million naira. Of course, you know that's not possible. Therefore, the alternative for 1 year money is to invest in a treasury bill rather to invest in real estate. Therefore, if I'm going to invest in real estate, I must be able to identify that location, that project that will give me a yield that exceeds that. Or some intervention mechanism by the government to ensure that they can provide me funding to cover that thing, knowing very well that the critical nature of that infrastructure and housing is necessary to bring down the pressure and the social conflict that exists. So you find that home ownership in Indonesia is 80%. Indonesia and Nigeria, by 1960, in all of these countries, these 5 countries you see here, Nigeria outperformed them in every indicator. In Ghana, it's 47%. That's in Accra, Tema, Tamale, and others. In Nigeria, we are talking about 25 to 30%, and in Kenya, it's 21%. Home ownership. Then home ownership is also a function of the investment culture, the savings culture. If you look at national savings rates, find a national savings rate low in Nigeria because investment culture has not caught on. And the savings rate, if you deduct compulsory savings, which is pensions, you find that national savings rate is even much lower. And there are many theories as to that. Now, these are the housing deficit compared to population growth rate, compared to urbanization. And like I said, it is not that Ekpe, people move to Ekpe for urbanization. People move from Lagos to Ekpe because certain developments took place. So you can have reverse urbanization, you can have migration in both ways, and depending on how you develop and you go along. So here we are, the housing deficit today is 28 million, so before it used to be about 35. Housing needs are expanding, and the type of units, home units, 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom, the family size is now beginning to change, the structure of the housing. Townhouses, duplexes, flats, affordable housing. So you put the entire gambit, right? And that's what we're looking at. And if you look at real estate and housing business enabling environment, look at ease of doing business, and look at real estate development. Out of 190 countries covered by the World Bank, Nigeria performs poorly in terms of ease of doing business, registering property, and getting title. In 1978, we passed the Land Use Decree, which became Land Use Act, which makes it possible, only the governor can sign your consent. So imagine if a state of 5 million people, adults, maybe 2 million people, and each of them has to have a house, and each of them has to have a land title. The governor in those 4 years will do nothing else but signing. So you can imagine what the Lagos State governor would, if he also depended on that, he would do nothing else, right? So the entire process of transferability, documentation of, and the payment of consent fee, which again became basically what we call sovereign extortion of the people, right? So they still pay the 15% consent fee. They pay subsidy for themselves now, pay an exchange rate. All of these things put together makes it almost impossible for them to survive. And so enforcing contracts, registering property, getting electricity, we're looking for meters. We are selling electricity, but we can't even measure what we're selling. How do we collect the money? So that becomes part of the whole process. So if I may, so these are the constraints to real estate sector. And how will the reforms that are being announced today actually address these issues? And please let us not make a mistake. Policy change is not necessarily a reform. Reforms are usually structural. So if you have monetary policy changes, you have trade policy changes, investment policy changes, they're all part of a reform package. But the structural reform, where institutions are reformed to be able to deliver to the people, is critical to this. What was announced in May 2023 were fancy promises and policies, but did not address the fundamental issue of the structure. If the institutions are not reformed, then they will not be able to deliver anything. Anybody can announce policy change, but when it comes to delivering it, it becomes very difficult. So if you have the pension system, which was well thought through, and which is the most formidable reform that Nigeria has faced over the past, actually embarked upon in the last 20, 30 years. Because you have to cast your mind back to how much and how long people stayed to get their pension under the defined benefit system. Ever since that day to now, we've gone through 3 recessions in Nigeria. We've gone through major market corrections, and no pensioner has lost 1 kobo. And we ignore it as if, oh, reform is only in the foreign exchange market. Reforms in the technology space. And how does this affect real estate? So pension means that a lot of savings have been mobilized. Are we going to take part of that and get them to invest in things? The concessioning of highways, does that make it more efficient? So the state of the economy is one thing. The policy changes that will make us address the broad economic goals and the impact it will have on the real estate sector. Because without housing, in the hierarchy of needs, food, shelter. So that's what we see, right? These are constraints, and I think Biodo has done a good job on that. And this is the gross national savings rate. You can see it. It has increased from 2015 all the way to about 34% of GDP. And this has happened as interest rates have increased. That is savings, but savings equals investment. But you cannot use this rate of interest, right, to fund real estate. Therefore, we need to have a special structure, special vehicles, Nigerian refinancing, mortgage arrangements and all of that, for that purpose, everywhere in the world. And the mortgage industry is usually bigger than any of the major industries in the world. So those are some changes that we have to deal with. This is the trend of urbanization in Nigeria. It's gone from 47% in 2015 to 55%. 55% of Nigerians live in urban spaces today. And what is more, because of CUDA, OPay, transactional banking and all virtual things, even if you are in the rural area, you are not disconnected from. So there's financial inclusion, there's a lot of technological fusion, and so I don't think that urbanization actually means living in the center, right? And the pressure. So technically speaking, the rents in urban areas, location, should be declining, while the rents in the rural areas should increase. So if I live in Kajola, if I live in Papalanto, if I live in Ewekoro, and I catch that train 30 minutes, and I get to Alagomeji, and I work there or work in Ikeja, or I catch the Ikeja train all the way to Onyibo, it means those things change the dynamics, right? And the attractiveness of those locations. Okay, so I think we have to, this is one of the things we have to interrogate and see what happens. Now, if you look at the construction sector performance and real estate has underperformed GDP growth. And the question is why? Why would GDP, and this is anemic GDP, because Nigeria's GDP at 3% is not getting anywhere. You need to do 7, 8, 9, 10% like China to liberate yourself from the shackles of poverty. So why? Because the constraints on real estate I've talked about. COO, we've talked about this. But it is the strictures that make real estate, insecurity, poor roads, drainage and all of that. And so everybody migrates to the same central point. If now you have the price of cement, 9,000 naira, and if we follow the previous trajectory, it was already heading to 16,000 naira, right? So the only reason why the price of cement is there because of the economies of scale. Between Dangote, Boa, Lafarge, and others, they've been able to maximize. So aluminum roofing sheets, iron rods, these are the, so the cost of putting up the buildings, the cost of the land and the structure, and then the return on investment that you get based on other things are what drives the real estate sector and its performance. So these are the sectors that contribute mainly to contribution to GDP. Real estate is only 5%, but it is a lot. It employs a lot of people both directly and in an ancillary basis. The industry presents major opportunities for both domestic and foreign investment. And again, real estate is the usual hedge against inflation. But something else is happening. The replacement cost of buildings are higher than the market value of buildings today. And the only way to know is ask my insurer is here. And first of all, Coastal Ally will send me the, what they call the maritime or whatever, meteorological forecast, that there are likely to be floods and all of that. They send that first. Then, to prepare your mind that you need to, right? Okay. Then they tell you that your premium has increased because, for odd reasons, because they have to, place these things, reinsure these things in other markets and all that. And I can understand it. But the fact is that when I ask myself and I look at the budget I used to put up a property, which was completed 5 years ago, and I look at the cost of trying to replace that property today, I don't even want to talk about it. So I quickly go and pay my premium, because the increase in premium compared to the value I'm creating on is nothing, right? But I ask myself, and I do a range view, that if the premium has increased by 60% and the value of the property has also increased by 300 and 400%, then it tells me something. But that's the first indication. The replacement cost is higher than market value. And market value is a function of income or the ability of the people to rent the property or to buy the property. So people use the gross rent multiplier, say 14 years rent gives you the value of a property. And then you ask yourself, 14 years rent in today's market, can that replace the property? No. But that's a technical thing. Then you use the capitalization method to say, let me use the interest rates and capitalize it that way. It doesn't give you the same answer. So when you say all of these things, it means that there's hidden value in real estate, big hidden value. And that is what you now begin to extrapolate and begin to say, what will happen when this economy gets into equilibrium? I mean dynamic equilibrium. Where will that value be, right? And that is why you see people who have put up all these high rises and all of that are sitting on a cushion of money. Because every time they revalue those assets, certain things happen. So I think that is, if you look at this, you find that GDP is the green bar, GDP is the amber bar, and real estate is the green bar. 2022, those years, during the COVID years, there was no new housing starts. Then after COVID came this, and now the new Abuja incentive and all of that, and the tax, you can now see that that sector, GDP, is actually outperforming real estate. But eventually, the real estate sector will catch up with this. So this is the dashboard that he shared, right? And what we're seeing for 2025 is 3.5% growth rate, population growth of 2.1, which is good. Inflation at the end of 2025, about 19. We revised it upwards a bit to about 22. Fiscal deficit as a percentage of GDP, minus 4.5. That it used to be as high as 6 or 7. The NPR at the end of 2025, which is now 27.5, would be down to 20.5. The exchange rate at the end of 2025, and this is tongue-in-cheek, 1,500, but the government in its budget made an assumption of 1,400. So it's a much more conservative approach, and even 1,500 is, to come to think about it, by this time last year, the exchange rate was 810, parallel market. So it has got only half of its value. There was no earthquake, no volcano, no riots, no COVID, no Ebola, nothing and all of that. And what can make a currency lose half of its value in 12 months when nothing happened, no shocks? So that's why the exchange rate management technique and strategy is something that calls for understanding the psyche of people who have come to accept that what is bad will remain bad forever and get worse, and that there's never a turn for the better. So, current account balance, 5.1 billion, 5.1% of GDP, and total factor productivity, and this is very important. In 2023, you had 0.6%, that is optimal use of capital stock, going to 2.3, and now 3.1. This is very important. So if, for example, you had a rail track from Orile to Marina, which was not doing anything, now when you complete it, that utilization of the capital stock, which you were paying interest on the loans and everything before, which was not generating anything, now begins to give you optimization. So, synopsis is that average growth rate in the past 5 years is about 2.1%, which is abysmally low. And inflation rose to its highest point in the last 3 months. It's beginning to taper a little bit. The currency will be managed, and I don't think it's going to get worse, but it's going to be, even though it's undervalued technically, we have to stay that course for the next 2 or so years before you start before you begin to see any appreciation. But to think that we'll get to 1,200 soon, or in the next year or next 2 years, it's not going to happen. So, main focus today is on GDP growth, inflation, exchange rate, and interest rates. And this is, you can see here, we are the world. The first thing, Nigerian economy growing at a slower pace than the rest of the world. It used to outperform the rest of the world, outperform Africa. Now we are underperforming because we have a management problem in Nigeria rather than just an output, rather than a revenue problem. If you correct the management, then you find that all the other things will fall in place. Now, we already talked about inflation. I think the key thing here, 2 variables. One, output constraint, but more than anything else, exchange rate. And when people say the exchange rate, and we look at inflation and we say the exchange rate, I think the big problem is that we think that the marginal propensity to import or the transmission of a weaker exchange rate into domestic prices. No, there's another variable. The other variable, and when we send people to the market, we do a survey every month. And we called on the people that sell onions. And they said, why has the price of onions at that time increased by over 90%? And the guys said, sorry, Naira. I said, how did the dollar affect? He said, no, say you don't understand and you don't get it. He said, the reason is this, that if I don't sell the onions to you, I can go across the border and sell it for CFA. So I'm not in this business to subsidize the country. I'm here to make my money. So I go across to Niger, I go across to Benin, and I sell it there. So if you cannot compensate me the price, the value of the price I would have gotten if I send it to Niger or Cameroon, no way. So the same thing is happening. The cross elasticity of demand for other, because if the price of onions increases, then the price of the substitutes also increase. And that drives the entire basket. So the exchange rate is the main factor. In fact, you can use it, one, to control prices. You can also use it to manage liquidity. Because the more forex you sell, the more naira you suck out, and that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy and all of that. So the inflation management strategy that will evolve in the next few months will emphasize, I believe, how to manage the exchange rate and how to bring it into the real effective exchange rate path. The currency is misaligned structurally and transitorily. So that it becomes a major issue. But the other thing is the output. Why would output, what is constraining output? Floods, security. And my time is up. So, well, I think that this is the forecast for 2024. But if you look at 2025, which is more important, we are going to be seeing, right, a difference. So look at Nigeria there in green there, look at Kenya, and look at South Africa. All these economies are. But if you look at their performance and look at their currency decline and weakness, there's nowhere. The Ghanaian city, in spite of all of the problems, and they're having an election on the 7th, the opposition is going to come into power, that you have 14 to 16 new cities to $1, right? Compared to last year when it was about 11. Now, look at the South African rand and look at the naira. If you look at 1 year variation, Nigeria's economy has performed quite poorly. So, as we finish, this is the inflation trajectory which I've talked about, and the impact of inflation coming back short term on real estate, and then eventually, right? So interest rates, cumulative hikes, 8.5%. They've hiked 13 times, status quo 9 times, and reduction only once. And this is the total impact you can see. So, trade-offs, corporate mortality when interest rates are high, layoff of staff, economic slowdown, recession is possible. The other way around is when you have longer term gains and the economy expands eventually. So, these are the various things, and you'll get it all in the pack that you'll get. And when we are heading towards convertible currency, we have higher exports, good trade balance, and external debt service begin to become green. So, I think that that's the reforms we've talked about, and I've already alluded to most of it. So, if I may close in the final slides, let's get to where the summary. Your key takeaways: the business environment is still unstable and vulnerable, and that is true. But the level of vulnerability is reducing, because the closer you get to equilibrium, the less the adjustments that you have to make. Right? And two, that if there are 10 doors of rent and mismatch in an economy, if you close 3, people will run to those 7 doors. So the rush in those 7 doors to create havoc increases. So every time the government, by policy change, removes a rental window, rent being the excess, now you increase the pressure. So what you need to do is to shut down all of these windows and take it by the hand, because there's no way that you can run a rent-seeking economy with 200 million people. So rising inflation, infrastructure deficit, you know that. Structural issues, land reform, sharp rise in poverty and inequality. 2025, beyond the outlook of the real estate market, is still promising, but cautiously. Please don't get carried away to say that 2025 is going to be marginally better than 2024. But if you trend it that things were getting worse, and then all of a sudden they stop getting worse and they start getting better, when you compare that to the trend, it's actually promising. This industry continues to be resilient. There's a lot of hidden value. And like I said, the intervention, the Federal Mortgage Bank, the Refinancing Corporation, the National Savings Ratio, and more than anything else, location, and localization of industry. I gave you the ECPE example. There are many ECPEs that are happening. Once you move resources in a particular direction, the market responds. So these are the key takeaways, and let me not. Thank you, madam.
Thank you even more, sir. It's okay. I'll get that. Thank you. I mean, when the Oracle is doing what the Oracle does, the wonderful thing is you would enjoy, not just enjoy, you have so much to learn. It's like, let him continue speaking, Joyce, please, because there's still so much to get. Good thing is, we can ask questions. There will be a panel conversation later, and the Oracle will still speak. Please appreciate Mr. Bismarck Rewane for your intervention this morning. Thank you, sir. We'll take just about 2 questions for now. If you have a question, we'd like to take just 2, because in the course of the event, when the panel is going on, we'll have some more questions. 2 questions. We have 2 hands up for both speakers. And if you're joining us virtually, you're online, feel free to drop your questions in the chat, and during the fireside session, we will make sure your questions are heard and attended to. No questions for now. Okay. or we're still waiting for that first person to raise their hand, and after that first person, all the other hands start coming up. Anyway, fantastic. We have a short video that tells us a little bit more about UPDC PLC, who we are, and some of the offerings that we have right now, just in case you didn't know by some chance. You know,
My name is Odunwayo Ojo. I'm the Managing Director of UPDC PLC. My name is Odunwayo Ojo. I'm the Managing Director of UPDC PLC. UPDC is the foremost real estate development, investment and management company in Nigeria, and is the only publicly listed real estate company in the country. At UPDC, we pride ourselves with delivering the highest of quality products and services to our clients and delivering exceptional value to all our stakeholders. Come with me as we show you some of our projects.
Starting at Ikoyi, let me introduce you to McDonald Court, a 32-unit private residential development containing 3 bedrooms and 4 bedrooms apartments and terraces. In Ikoyi, we also developed Cameron Green, a 28-unit apartment building which was completed in 2014. In Victoria Island, we developed the Victoria Mall Plazas, a commercial building sitting on over 7,000 square meters, and a 48-unit apartment building. This is Pinnock Beach Estate, a private luxurious residential development which we completed in 2010. Now, in Shangotedo, along the popular Monastery Road, we are developing another private luxurious residential development which we call the Hampshire. This is a 5-hectare site and service development which is broken into varying residential and commercial plot sizes that will boast of luxurious and quality infrastructure. This is the work progress on site in October 2024. And this is a rendering of what the functional estate would look like. Now, moving into the fast developing Ogombo Road in the Ibrahim area, we bring to you Brompton City, which is a 30-hectare mixed-use development, which includes modern residential and commercial zones. Don't miss out on this opportunity to invest in our properties that offers great returns and a serene lifestyle. For more information, call the numbers on your screen.
Right here in the room. Thank you so much. We are very glad that you are here, else we would have just been having a family conversation at UPDC PLC, talking to us ourselves for ourselves. But no, we're happy that each and every one of us is here. Before we go into the fireside chat, we'd like to receive a word from the Chief Host of the State, Mr. Governor of Lagos State, Mr. Babajide Sanwo-Olu, who is very ably represented by Mrs. Temitope Akimbola, who was earlier introduced. Please welcome her very warmly for the rendition of Mr. Governor's speech.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Please permit me to stand on existing protocols. So I'm here actually wearing 2 caps, as I told my dear sister. So Mr. Governor was invited, but he couldn't be here, and the special advisor to Mr. Governor on housing was supposed to be here to represent him, but she couldn't be here. So I'm representing both of them, and I'm here to deliver Mr. Governor's speech. But please, before I do that, please permit me to talk about the Office of the Special Advisor to Mr. Governor on Housing. She oversees the Lagos State Real Estate Regulatory Authority, an agency of the Lagos State government that is charged with the monitoring and overseeing the real estate sector in Lagos State. And I'm here with my team. They're at the back there. And what we do at LASRIRA for short is just to make sure that everyone that is involved in the real estate business in Lagos State is registered with the Lagos State government. And this is just so that Lagos State will be rid of all those that are actually affecting the sector negatively. So please, if you're here, you're in the real estate business, please see us at the back so that you can actually register your company or your business. and get the permit, the certificate for operations in Lagos State. It is the law, and it is for our benefit, I can assure you. Thank you. This is a remark delivered by Mr. Babajide Olushola Sanwo-Olu, Governor of Lagos State, at the 3rd UPDC Real Estate Summit held on Thursday, 21st November 2024 at the Whitbaker Hotel, Ikoyi, Lagos. It is an honor to join you today at the 3rd Annual Real Estate Summit organized by UPDC PLC, a flagship institution in Nigeria's real estate sector. Let me begin by commending the board and management of UPDC for this timely initiative, which reflects your commitment to advancing conversations that shape the future of our built environment. The theme for this year's summit, Current Economic Reforms and its Impact on the Real Estate Sector, is both relevant and thought-provoking. It's at a time when Nigeria is navigating transformative economic reforms, such as the removal of subsidies, exchange rates unification, and infrastructure investments. It is essential for stakeholders in key sectors, including real estate, to assess the impacts, recalibrate strategies, and explore new opportunities. For Lagos, the stakes are particularly high. As Africa's fastest growing urban hub, we are keenly aware that the development of our real estate sector is integral to achieving sustainable growth, addressing housing deficits, and enhancing the quality of life for our citizens. Initiatives like the Lagos Mega City Project, the ongoing Blue and Red Rail Line projects, and the widespread urban renewal efforts are deliberate steps towards reimagining our city. We recognize that these efforts would not be successful without strategic public-private partnerships. Today's summit provides a valuable platform to deepen collaboration, share expertise, and generate innovative solutions. As we discuss the impact of economic reforms on the real estate sector, I encourage us to think beyond challenges and focus on opportunities. With reforms come a chance to re-engineer processes, attract investments, and build structures that are both inclusive and resilient. I reaffirm the commitment of this administration to policies and projects that enhance housing, urban renewal, and infrastructural development. We will continue to engage with stakeholders to ensure a Lagos that thrives for generations to come. Once again, I commend UPDC for this laudable initiative and wish all participants productive deliberations. And I look forward to the outcome of this summit, which I am sure will forge new pathways for us to transform our challenges into milestones and vision into reality. I thank you for listening. Mr. Babajide Olushola Sanwo-Olu, Governor of Lagos State. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Governor, for your kind intervention. And solutions, indeed, we will have, and I'm sure you will receive word, because somehow, you'll be a part of the development. Thank you once again. Let's appreciate Mr. Governor of Lagos State in person of Mrs. Temitope Akimbola. Thank you, ma'am. The conversation about the solutions, the opportunities, we've heard a number of the challenges, the opportunities in depth, not just from the economic side, but the opportunities in the real estate sector, 2024 ending, 2025 up till 2050, hopefully. The conversations are about to start. To lead the conversation, I think we should all stay that way, please. Yes. but extend to there, not here. Thank you. To lead the conversation will be our host of the day, our CEO of UPDC PLC. But before I welcome him, I'd just like to ask us to observe a few housekeeping etiquette. Check your phone. Just bring your phone out. Just check it. Is it silent? If it is, great. If it's not, please make it silent. Sometimes the vibrate mode is even louder than some other people's ringtone, so your vibrate mode may not be the best right now. So that in the course of the conversations, we'll minimize the distractions that we may have. And if you need any attention, you need to use the restroom, it's all through that door where we all came in, and we have some of our ushers there to guide you, so that this period we can really maximize. For those who are online, please ensure to drop your comments and questions. We'll make sure they get up to the conversants today. The moderator for the panel session, ladies and gentlemen, our CEO, please welcome him as he takes his seat, Mr. Odunayo Ojo, who is a walking, breathing, living entity of real estate, decades of experience, from UPDC to the rest of the world, back to UPDC to sit at the helm of affairs. I mean, who better to steer this conversation today? Recently, Business Day honored him, as they should, and as many others will, as one of the top 25 CEOs, and he received that award just about a month ago. So please appreciate Mr. Ojo, CEO, and not just that Business Day gave him the award. The people here at UPDC feel that this is the life he lives. He's not just talk, he's talk and do, and there's some love in there. Many times in business environments, we don't like to use the word love, but he loves people more than he loves his job. So appreciate him. He's seated now. The Oracle will join up right now to deepen the conversation that we'll be having. Please welcome Mr. Bismarck Rewane, the Managing Director and CEO of Financial Derivatives Company Limited, Lagos. Many people don't even know he has a company, because his company is Nigeria. You know, we're all part of his company. Thank you so much, sir. Dr. Biodun Adedipe will also be up here on this conversation. We heard him earlier, and we're happy to hear some more. I know the questions will be mostly around the solutions and the opportunities. Please also welcome Mr. Ayo Ibaru. Don't worry, I'm going to move this very shortly. Mr. Ayo Ibaru is coming from all the way back of the room. Please receive him. Real estate advisor per excellence, consultant in many lead corporates. If you don't see him on TV, on Arise or CNBC, where he's contributing technically, you might also catch him on a podcast where he's talking about real estate affairs across West Africa. And if he's not doing that, he's co-authoring one periodic research report or the other, which will win one award or the other, and has won several and has received some Euro Money awards. And it is an honor to have you here with us, Mr. Ayo. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll take my seat, tip my mouth for the next 40 minutes or thereabouts, and we will focus on the panel over here. Enjoy it. Over to you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for that beautiful introduction, and a very warm welcome to everybody, and good morning. So we've heard about the trends, we've heard about the challenges and some of the insights from our experts. Now it's time to bring it down, I think, to the practicalities. And you know, I'm going to be posing some questions, so my job, I think, is the easiest job on the panel. Starting with Mr. Ayo Ibaru, as a real estate practitioner, and we've heard about all these reforms today, what would you say are the top 3 major impacts of these reforms as a practitioner in the industry that you felt the most?
Thank you for having me here, and good day everyone. So the consensus in the built environment is, where have the previous policies gotten us to? And one of the things that I hear about is the costs of just operating in the built environment. So take, for example, what the FX rates have done to the importing of raw materials for construction. Now that has complicated the supply side of development to the point where if you're thinking of doing residential now going into 2025, you're probably going to be safest doing luxury or as close to luxury as you can in bite-sized developments. That's on the residential, which again is a leading indicator of what we can expect in the commercial real estate market. Mixed use will continue to carry a lot of weight because now it's really the only way to absorb the many shocks that Nigeria's economy provides, except of course you have some form of client list where whatever you put out they will buy, a la Ikoyi, Banana Island, and so on and so forth, if we're speaking about Lagos, Nigeria. But I did read through the proposal on the tax reform, and I did come across the removal of taxes on commercial rents received, which does help the demand side. And what that means is, as a landlord who has a commercial asset, you have more flexibility in terms of the concessions you can give to your tenants because you're paying less on taxes, assuming that this reform goes through. But maybe the problem, as we speak in Nigeria, is more of a supply problem. And by that I mean supplying assets into the market that, would I say, are affordable, but are within the buying power of your average Nigerian. So the reforms that we've seen so far, the consensus view is it's tending towards the negative, even though this has now brought up some opportunities, which I hope we can discuss in the light of this conversation.
Thank you very much. A round of applause for Mr. Ibarra, please, for his insight. So I'll turn to my right so that the experts can maybe unpack some of the discussions today. If we do some kind of post-mortem over the last 1 year, 6 months or so of this administration and some of the reforms we have seen, in your view, and I'll ask the same question to Mr. Rewane and Dr. Adedipe, what policies and reforms would you say have worked as intended, and which ones would you say need a little bit of tweaking? Because we also have in the audience and online policymakers who can take some advice from what you're discussing today. So I'll start with Dr. Adedipe, and then we'll come to Mr. Rewane. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, MD. My major reform plank that I would say has been positive is fiscal consolidation. And that is because that was driven largely with technology, blocking leakages, and we can all relate with the fact that there's been an increase in the accretion to federation account, which of course reflects in what the various governments at the local, state, and federal level have received as monthly allocations. So that is, again, we can trace it to the exchange, rate policy, that a lot of that is the fallout of the unified exchange rates on the one hand, but we can also leave out the fact that there's been an improvement in terms of consolidation. So where there is a daily sweep of 50% of what MDAs and GOEs generate daily. So that has improved significantly the receipts. But there are still a lot of gaps, especially on the flip side of, the revenue expenditure nexus. We still need to do a lot more work in cost containment. Of course, there are also mentions in the reform package what the government is going to do in that regard. Yes, they've made achievements in terms of lifting revenue, but the same commitment to enhancing revenue should be put also into cost containment. And we have quite a number of propositions in that regard. Then for me, there's still a gap in real estate. And why will I say that? If you look at real estate finance, we can identify 4 major stakeholders: those who construct, those who finance, and then the user finance, which is the one that deals with mortgages. And of course, there are the enablers. And that is where insurance that Mr. Rewane made reference to earlier, okay, and other, enablers within that ecosystem. So if the reforms are going to impact positively on the sector, then we have to again interrogate those particular stakeholders and how they relate with the reforms on the one hand, and now that the reforms can also enhance their ability to deliver. There was a mention also here now of affordable housing. And I think that is a direction we need to pay a lot more attention to. And government must play a leading role in that. It can't be left to the market, because that's the pattern generally all over the world. Let me stop there for now. Thank you.
If I look at the reforms generally, the first part, the exchange rate review and the depreciation, while it's a disadvantage to those of us domestic, it is a major advantage in terms of competitiveness, in terms of people coming into Nigeria. So if you brought $1 last year, you got 800 naira. You brought $1 this year, you get in 1,600. So what does that mean? It means that tourists, visitors, and all of that, you would notice that if you go through Lagos, apart from, I think, the Renaissance Hotel in Ikeja, in the last 5 to 6 years, there's been no new, or even 10 years, there's been no new branded hotel across Nigeria. So what does it do? Real estate, hotels are the worst form of real estate, because you can't use a hotel for anything else, because every room has a bath, and the plumbing, you can't convert it to anything else. So it means that the hotel business is going to grow rapidly, right? If there's some consistency in it. I think that's a major issue. So you would probably have the Hyatt Regency, the Intercontinental, and others coming into the market, big time, and the knock-on effect on the economy. Number two is that the tax reforms that we are talking about, the shift of VAT to where the consumers are, rather than to where the producer is. In other words, if Lagos State, where the manufacturers were getting maybe 60% of the VAT, now it's going to get 42%, right? So you will find that the guys in Aba, where they buy the product, so Abia State will get higher allocation of, so the IGR is in those states, which means that real estate in those areas where the state governments are now getting money more from the VAT become more attractive. They'll be able to do more in terms of the infrastructure that will encourage people to build in those areas. So the tax reforms, first of all, exemptions. Two, moving the benefit of it to where the consumers are. And three is that if, for example, you buy a fixed asset or capital asset, you are allowed to deduct that immediately. So if MTN puts up optic fiber or something, they will take it and they can pass it on in terms of a drop, a drop in their pricing for the ordinary man. So you can begin to use this tax revenue collection where the burden of tax is not on the people, but the burden of tax is on the company, who also has the benefit. So I think the tax reform is a major development that we have to look out for. It has not been passed, but I'm aware of the benefits. Again, like all taxes, there are 4 canons of taxation. One is that it must generate revenue, and this does it. 2, it must be fair and progressive. That means the rich will pay more than the poor. In this case, it doesn't really happen, because when you are using VAT, Dangote will pay the same tax as I do, and we are in different income brackets, right? 3 is that it must be neutral. It doesn't distort my allocation of my resources. And finally, it must be easy to administer. So those are the canons, and that's where I see it happening, and the effect on real estate is significant. Thank you.
Sorry. So back in 2011, 2 researchers established what would become the 6 pillars through which funding is directed into various countries, and they called it the Real Estate and Investment Attractiveness Index. Now, for, let's just say, high-income countries, things like the strength of their economy, the opportunities that are emerging, were the priorities for foreign fund managers thinking of investing in a certain country when they looked through that lens. Now, for emerging markets and frontier countries like Nigeria, what they focused on were things like socioeconomic and political stability and the rule of law. So I am confident that the tax reforms, as has been explained, will make Nigeria more attractive from an economic standpoint. I guess what maybe the concern is with a few global funds that we've spoken to is hopefully these things get passed. Now, the comments on hospitality surprised even myself, tracking the market for as long as we've been able to do it. Now, up to the pandemic, hospitality wasn't, by that I mean hotels, restaurants, and so on and so forth, wasn't the poster child for success when you want to invest in Nigeria's real estate market. But after the pandemic, two things happened. One, grade B or mid-market hotels and restaurants saw a demand because the big name brands had to follow the COVID-19 protocol to a T. But Nigerians have a cultural way of behaving. We can't walk for too long without resting and resting well. So they saw the demand. Now, when the COVID-19 protocols were lifted, we have seen an unprecedented growth in hospitality. And that's just to buttress the point earlier said. Quite a number of southeastern governors have prioritized hospitality because it does a couple of things. One, it aggregates infrastructure around a certain part of a city. And what that does is that it has a multiplier effect on other use classes. So when you have a hotel built, a few things happen. One, the rent per day or the price per room per day for hotels around, let's say, a Radisson or a Marriott goes up for anything between 15 to 20%. The next thing you see is an increased demand for residential, which drags in retail, which then drags in logistics, and then warehousing sees an uptick, which is part of the example we heard earlier. So ultimately, once these reforms get passed through, I do think it will put Nigeria in the right light for attracting investment.
Thank you very much. A round of applause for our speakers. I think, for me, coming into this summit today, I didn't really put a lot of attention on the tax reforms, to be honest. I mean, I was thinking more around foreign exchange, forex, and inflation, exchange rate. But it's interesting to see that there are a lot more reforms happening today that have direct and indirect impact on our industry. So thank you very much for your insights. My next question again goes to Mr. Ibaru. And then after my next round of questions, we'll take questions from the audience. So please start writing your questions down. So my next question is, as a consultant, what would you advise the players in this industry to do to prepare themselves to weather the storm or to take advantage of the opportunities that these reforms would portend, without a doubt? Thank you.
So the way 2025 is looking, we would have to work with flights to core, a flight to safety. That's the general real estate term. So one, land and land banking would be the way to go. The reason is land is arguably the most resilient asset class. So if you're thinking of investing in 2025 and you don't want to be too adventurous, you want to go with land, and by that, land in the Ekpe areas, as we heard earlier, towards the outskirts. The second thing you would want to do is warehousing, and the reason is, as we speak in Lagos, Abuja, Port Harcourt, and then second-tier cities as Ibadan, Kano, Enugu, warehousing space occupancy is north of 95%, and that is regardless of the state of the warehouse. Now, should you feel like you have some money to spend, you might, especially if you're in Lagos, you might want to invest in either cold storage, cold pharma, or you might want to go with grade A, air-cooled, high-end warehousing, because on that, you can charge per square meter in USD, because that's the resilience that you're looking for. Aside from that, I would have to say mid-market hospitality. The reason I would say mid-market and not big name or brand name hospitality is the big names have shown that Nigeria is the destination for hospitality in Africa in 2025, and I'm not sure you have or one would want to deploy gunpowder to battling them. So let them build what they're building and then position to build something around them, because you can't compete on price, you can't compete on quality, you can't compete on client list. So it's best to prepare around that. Now, a low bar, low level entry investment model would be logistics. What you want to do is follow the track laid out by Hey Food, which is you avoid Lagos, right? When it comes to logistics, food delivery, all of that, if you don't want too much of funding to go into operations management, you want to go with your Ibadan, with your Abuja, with your Kaduna, Kano, Port Harcourt to a lesser extent, because you would have volume sufficient enough to drive your ROI, but your costs would be optimized. Residential, I think, is still a good way to go, but what you want to do is don't build too much at a time. Go for as high or as close to luxury as you can get. Avoid mid-market, at least for the first 3 to 6 months of next year. And know that there is going to be quite a bit of competition. And the reason I say this is because we've been tracking these markets, nodes, Lagos, Abuja, Port Harcourt, for a couple of years. And as we speak now, in Lagos, there is no major node that has an occupancy rate that is less than 95% or 98%. What this means is that for every 100 houses you see, 90% of them are occupied. Now, the owner might not be in the house because he or she has money to buy 2, 3, 4, 5, and they can't stay in 5 houses at the same time. So I think what you might want to avoid is third-party grade A office space, because not many people are ready to pay $750 per square meter as rent, $200 per square meter as service charge. What you want to do is work more with 5th floor and below grade B office space. The only people doing big buildings now are like your Dangote doing his owner-occupier along Alfred Rewane, because, I mean, he has the people to stay in the building. Everyone else is a knife fight in a phone booth type situation. But most importantly, and I was discussing this with a colleague in the industry, because of the way the economy is likely to move next year, we would want to be careful around the kinds of contracts we sign, the escalations that are included, the exit clauses, and so on and so forth, because you want to go into 2025 cautious, careful, and protected on as many fronts as you possibly can. So I think I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much for that. I think Mr. Rewane wants to lend his voice.
Thank you very much, Ayo. One thing I must caution is that high occupancy rate is one thing, high delinquency rate is another. So we've also noticed that a lot of people's fortunes have changed in the last. Some guys were making a lot of money 2 years ago and continue making money are now actually not making that much. So we are beginning to see, even if you're going to shopping mall, you are beginning to see empty shops and all of that, because the sales are not there. People are down trading. People are buying less, lower quality. Also, we are beginning to see, if you go to the cost list in the courts, the number of people who are going to court to sue for rent default and all of that is getting higher. So if I had paid 3 years rent in advance, and 3 years ago my fortunes were looking this way, and now they've changed, the chances are that come year 3, I'm unable to pay, and I'm unable to move. So I promise you, and after a year or so, then you now begin to. So the write-offs or the factoring of those things, and the important thing is that some of those properties which were passed on from one generation to the other, the default rate has affected the estate earnings, and so you have families having problems. We are seeing that already, where somebody passes on and passes the property to 3 or 4 children. Some are desperate to get money, and therefore, what I'm saying is that there is an opportunity also in taking over distressed assets or delinquent assets, getting the tenant to go, in one way, refurbishing or bringing the property back to life with proper value, and getting higher rents. So if you drive along some roads in Victoria Island and Ikoyi, you see 1, 2, 3 good houses, then abandoned property. So you go in there because there's dispute, there's delinquency, there's dispute. You go, resolve the dispute, get the value, refurbish the property, what we call adaptive reuse, convert it into other things, and you get a lot more from that than actually starting a new property. Thank you.
Another round of applause for our speakers, please. What I'm hearing from our speakers today is that we need to move away from conventional thinking, start looking at some brownfield developments, not just greenfield, and start looking at potentially other asset classes, other than residential and the usual suspects. So very good insights. So I will turn to my right again and ask the question I asked Ayo in a different way. Someone once said, be greedy when others are fearful, and be fearful when others are greedy. I think it was Warren Buffett that said that. So as we enter this next phase of our journey as a country, what would be your advice to the players in this industry? Are we to be fearful when others are greedy, or to be greedy when others are fearful? How do you think we can navigate these headwinds and come out on the other side victorious? Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Now, my take on that is this. The dynamics of the market point in a particular direction. Now, we've seen a lot happening in the warehousing space. And there's a huge, in terms of opportunities, and also investments taking place right now. And I'm also aware from our market surveys and activities that our company does within that space, that there's a lot of conversions of warehouses in terms of refrigeration. A whole lot is happening there. And also in terms of estate development, tending more towards affordable housing. In fact, what produced what is done now currently under the Renewed Hope agenda is an outcome of a survey of the market, where you find that the delinquents Mr. Rewane made reference to happening in the area of apartment blocks with 2-3 bedroom flats, a good number of them are now being converted to 1 bedroom. And that, in a way, has moderated delinquency in some locations, on the one hand. And also, this has been proven in the market, that a new apartment block of 1 bedroom goes faster in terms of uptake than 3-4 bedroom apartments. That has also been proven in the market. So if you now match that with the dynamics of income and the environment we live in, that gives a pointer in terms of of what to look at going forward. And that is why in most advocacy that we do now in real estate, it is focusing more on affordable housing. And how will that play? Okay, recently, the last couple of days, the government announced the 250 billion naira, fund for the real estate sector. I'm yet to do a proper dimensioning of it. What is it all about? And I'm also aware that efforts are on with restructuring of the mortgage refinancing corporation. That effort is also ongoing. And there's a whole lot also that is going on right as we speak in Murphy. Murphy is the holder of government assets that are valued at over $30 billion. So itself and all the entities under Murphy are currently undergoing restructuring as well. So for me, therefore, these are spaces we can also interrogate going forward to identify opportunities and then flow along with the market dynamics. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adedipe. Mr. Rewane, you want to add your voice to that?
I want to mention something about two things, actually. One is about the use of interlocking blocks for roads, which, even though the capital cost is higher, the maintenance and running costs are lower. So in terms of estate developers and all that, the roads leading up to where you are developing, that needs to be. The second thing is that you know that the infrastructure, storm drainage, and some of the other things that surround the estates, right? Estate development are becoming major issues. So we are beginning to see groups coming together to provide infrastructure support for a fee, right? Therefore, the developer is not burdened with the cost of carrying all of these things. Normally, they used to carry all of this. Now you have groups that are doing all of this and sharing the burden and making sure that the time from when project starts to when it's completed is shorter. The shorter that is, the more remunerative and the more lucrative those projects are. So we are seeing specialization. We are seeing movement towards high capital costs and low running costs eventually. And we are seeing a lot of shared services along the way, bringing down the average cost of running this project. I think that's the key. So specialization, movement towards higher capital costs, and then the last thing is the concessioning of roads, which is a major thing. We've seen one or two. We've seen the Lagos to Otta Road, and which is being worked on. The Benin to Asaba and certain roads. If you look at the concessioning traffic, the traffic vehicular count, you'll be surprised how many vehicles go. For example, the Lagos to Otta vehicle count is about 30 to 40,000 vehicles a day. Then if you tariff it in such a way that the trucks pay about 2,000 and the smaller vehicles pay about 200, 300, in a 35-year concession, the revenue profile comes to almost 1.4 trillion naira. What is the cost of upgrading this road and putting all sorts of central reservations and protecting it? The cost of it is about 200 to 300 billion. Where do you get the money from? The billboards, the restaurateurs, the maintenance people. So if only 17 roads have now been outsourced or concession that way. By the time you make it a national thing, one, kidnapping and ransom drops because you can't, everything is now protected. Reservations about 3 to almost 6 feet high. So you can't, to kidnap somebody on the road, you have to carry the person and throw him up and bring him the other way. So it's an impossible task. It's easier to go and do something else than to kidnap. So all of these things lead to the fact that if the access roads are there, the security is improved, and that this government, you don't have to wait for the government to maintain potholes and all of that because the concessionaires have that maintenance contract. You find that real estate becomes much more lucrative, and the sharing of costs for people who are providing infrastructure also makes that more lucrative.
Thank you very much. A round of applause for our speakers. So now we're going to go to the audience for some questions. I think in the interest of time, we'll just take a few questions, and then the conversations can continue even after the panel. Do we have a roving mic? Madam Joyce, I see a hand to my right. But let's take the lady first. They say ladies first. Then we'll come to the gentleman on the other side. I hope you don't mind. All right.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
My name is Catherine Wosu. It's always a delight to listen to Dr. Adedipe and Mr. Rewane. My question is on the issue of the shortlet. Someone has been speaking to me recently about shortlet that is now booming. So my question is, what are the risks that one will face if you decide to invest in that particular area? And is this something that you think is sustainable? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I think Mr. Rewane wants to take an attempt on that. Maybe before we go to someone else.
See, when Uber came and Lyft and all of that, taxis everywhere in the world suffered. The person that benefited most is the consumer. So the Airbnb option actually reduced the attractiveness of the branded hotels, right? So what it did was to make them more efficient and more competitive. If not, they would have been charging through the moon. So if property vacancy factor, I keep my property open so that the Airbnb, but there are issues with the Airbnb.
But maybe one minute you can address that. You want to delve into that? So we are running out of time, but I'm sure you can quickly address it.
The normal rules for investment is that short term you look for direction, long term you look for value. So treasury bill rates are 90 days to 90 days, 180 days, 364 days. It won't last forever. If you look at the long term, if you look at the bond market, so the Nigerian bond markets for 10-year bonds and all of that are much lower than the treasury bill rate. So if you're just hopping around the place looking for as an opportunity strategy, it's not going to do anything. Long-term value is where you look for it and where you can lock in. Also, the thing is about that, after a while, I want to remember the Nigerian government issued what they called a diaspora bond not long ago. And guess what? The diaspora bond was priced at 9.75% per annum in dollars. And so everybody looked at it, and they are rational economic agents. Nigerians are very, very sharp. So what they did was to take their naira, bought dollars at 1,600, converted it, and then used that to buy. So why did they do that? Because four options. One, if you put your money under a mattress in January, I put 100,000. When you got in December, you'll be worth only about 68,000 naira from 100,000 naira, because 34% of. If you use that to buy dollars and kept it under your mattress, you'll be worth $98 instead of $100. $2 would have gone to inflation. If you invested it in this amount, you will be worth $110 instead of $100. The rate of inflation in the US was about 2.6%, and you are getting 9.75. So you are 7% ahead of inflation. 7% ahead of inflation. If you add that 7% to 33% here, you're actually at 40%. So everybody took money, changed it, bought this, so that they can get 40% return, right? And you're trying to make money, right? So the rule, Warren Buffett said, do not lose money, rule number one. Rule number two, do not forget rule number one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A round of applause for our speakers. All right, thank you very much. We're out of time. So let's also appreciate our speakers once again. Are we taking photographs before we leave the stage? So let the conversation continue even afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you. ED, please. NED, Mr. Governor. Please, we'd like to ask to guide exactly where you want them Yes. Yes. In between. Are they okay? Please look at the camera and say more money. Yes, please, right now. All right, before you leave, we'll ask you to present our tokens of appreciation to our speakers. The ED, NED, you can return to your seats. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Governor. The CEO will present our tokens of appreciation to our speakers. Please bring. First one here for Mr. Ayo. Thank you.
So on behalf of the board and management of UPDC, we would like to say a very big thank you for honoring us today and for your insights. Thank you.
Okay. All right, next. Thank you.
On behalf of the board and management of UPDC, Mr. Rewane, thank you very much. I know how difficult it was to get you to speak today. So,
thank you so much. Please appreciate our moderator and CEO for excellent moderation, timekeeping, all in one. Thank you so much, sir. The questions that came from the online space were weaved into the other questions because the situations, the stories, and the asks were about the same. And we say thank you for the engagement. Thank you so much. To say thank you to us all and leave the closing remarks, we'd like to welcome the Managing Director, UPDC FM, our sister company. Please receive Mr. Kumbo Lawal as she comes forward for her remarks. Thank you.
I hate to be the last. Everybody is like ready to go. Thank you. My name is Tokumbo Lawal, and as we come to the close of the summit, today on behalf of UPDC PLC, I would like to say thank you very much and thank our speakers, they're not here, Dr. Adedipe for his compelling and insightful analysis of the economic landscape, Mr. Bismarck Rewane, aka the Oracle, for his bold perspectives and thought-provoking commentary, and Mr. Ayo Baru for his very practical and actionable insights, that basically illuminated a critical aspects of this real estate value chain. Would like to specially recognize Mrs. Akinola, who played the dual role of representing the executive governor of Lagos State and the special advisor, and also provided insights as one of the people at the helm of affairs of La Sierra, and bringing invaluable expertise and the importance of what we're doing. And to each of everyone that's been, took the time to come here and participate with us. We're hoping that we will leave here enriched, and the conversations here will provide deeper insights into the challenges and opportunities in the industry. So I have a quick plug. We're a proud subsidiary of UPDC PLC, that's UPDC FM. And we recognize the role of FM in the broader real estate ecosystem. So our mission remains focused on delivering sustainable, high-quality solutions that enhance long-term value of properties. And I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge and thank our Group Managing Director, Mr. Odunwayo Ojo. Can we clap for him? And the remarkable team, the commercial advisory, sales, and the board and everybody else for bringing this together. And, we deeply appreciate the board's ongoing support and guidance in UPDC's mission. So Pretty much that's what I have. I just want to encourage all of us to take the lessons, ideas, and valuable connections from here, and let us continue to network and continue to collaborate in the real estate space. So we look forward to welcoming you next year to our next summit, and thank you very much, everybody.
Distinguished guests, that has almost brought us to an official close for today. But before we go, I have a very small assignment to ask of you, if you don't mind. YouTube, can you go to YouTube right now? Possible? Go to YouTube and search for UPDC. You'll find it almost immediately. Go there, you'll see where we are live. Then share it to your WhatsApp status and say, I was there and it was really good. You should hear what was said. I mean, you really have to, come on, like really. Because I know that your people on WhatsApp status, they believe you. So share it right now. Say, I have been there for 2 hours and a few minutes, and it was excellent conversations. You should hear it. I wanted you to hear the conversations first, so that when you're writing about it, it will be with a lot of conviction. Share it to your status, share it to your WhatsApp groups, especially your old boys and old girls, and tell them what we talked about here. Thank you so much. There is lunch, and the ushers will guide us. Have a wonderful time. See you next year. And before then, thank you and good afternoon.
Thank you.